Hi YouTubers, and this is another servicing video from Sort 6233, and here I've got another locomotive from my viewer called John. He sent it in, he's called it a D800. He says it's bad running and getting hot. So I think the first thing I want to do is put it on a bit of track and see what the results I get. On the test track, I'm just going to measure the amount of voltage it takes to make the locomotive move. And it's starting to move there at minus 1.8 volts. That's pretty good. So let's reverse the direction. And 1.5, it started to move there, 1.8 volts again, in the opposite direction. So there's not a running problem per se, but if it's getting hot, I think I might need to run it and test. The track is not the best as always, so let's get a wee hand there. And put it into there. It's the diode. Reverse the direction, and whoops, and back it comes. So I think until I see anything definite, I'll put that onto a rolling road and let it run for a while and then come back to it later on. Anyway, this conrod, I mentioned it earlier, been upside down, and I wanted to run it as I got it rather than change this round and then run it. So I ran it, got some figures, and now I'm going to change this round and see if that makes a difference. John mentioned that this locomotive seemed to run poorly and overheated. Well, I ran it on the track for about half an hour and I didn't detect any overheating, but it was drawing a wee bit more current than I would have thought. So this was something like 270 milliamps, which I felt was quite excessive, but again, I've never done any other of these, so it may be normal. We'll soon find out. The conrod is held in by a push pin, which I've carefully manoeuvred out. So I'm just going to take the conrod again. Seems to be okay. I'm going to fit it, as I said, with these reservoir pips pointing up the way as the locomotive is forward, and now the pin can be replaced and pushed home. So a final bit of pressure into my screwdriver, and that looks like it there. So let me put it back on the track and see if that has made any difference. I was just about to put it on the track when I noticed that this front coupler is flopping around, so I think the coupler spring is also missing. So I'm going to attend to that before I do any more. And I'm looking at this and there's a screw missing here. Now again, John had mentioned somebody doing repairs to his locomotives, and they seem to have this propensity to have missing screws. This is the third locomotive that I've come across from that batch of 5 with a screw missing, and also a coupler spring and the conrod the wrong way around. I found the replacement screw for the front of the locomotive body, and now I'm going to remove these screws to allow me to replace this spring in the coupler. Allowed the other coupler to come loose, but I can soon fix that back in. Right, let's find a spring. That should just sit in there. Okay. And the coupler push that in. And there. Oops. And that's what's always a problem. Possibly jump out. I realise I should have been using a fine pair of tweezers. So grab that there. Slide it in. Coupler pushes back. Like so. I'm trying to be delicate but firm at the same time. Not an easy task. Come on, in you get. So that's refitted a spring in there. However, it wasn't quite as simple as I anticipated. For a start, this screw here sits right behind the coupler there, and if I try and fit what I thought would be a normal coupler spring, when it compresses, it's not going to leave any room for this coupler. In fact, I tried a couple of times. However, I did find a very small spring of only about 3 turns, which has sat in there, and now I've got a coupler which is sprung and returns to its normal position. Whereas previously, without the spring, this drips and doesn't connect to other rolling stock. So now I can fit this chassis back into its body shell. I have got 2 screws somewhere. They've rolled away, but I'll find them, fit them in, and then we'll get it back onto the track. Here we go. I knew they wouldn't be that far away. There's one. Just in there. And while I'm telling you this, another surprising fact about this particular model is that these 2 screws which hold the chassis into the body shell at the front actually hold the whole chassis into the body, because there is no attachment near the back. This screw simply holds the bottom plate onto the chassis itself. This sits into a little groove for the coupler, but there is no screwing into the body at this section, at this end. So that's why I'm a bit worried about the fact that there's one screw missing, because these two are the interface between the chassis and the body shell. So I'm just going to go and put that onto the track and make sure that it still works. I've been running this little 08 shunter for over 30 minutes, continuous, and what I'm going to try and do is check it for overheating and for excessive current draw. It certainly has been behaving very impeccably, never hesitated once, and it's just moving along lovely and sweetly. So let's just come round, have a look at the current draw. It's 200 milliamps, so it hasn't gone excessive, which you might expect if it was overheating. So when it comes round this time, I want to stop it and I'll check it for overheating. So let me just bring it round here, then it should come there. That's it there, lovely. Just before I do so, I'm just going to make sure that it dries in the opposite direction. Up to 5-6 volts and away it goes. And I don't think there's any real problem with that. That is a nice machine. Round it comes again. And I'm just going to bring it to a halt there. So I want to check it for overheating. I put my fingers on it, and that is very cool. Unfortunately you can't tell that, so it is very cool. So I don't think there's any problem with overheating anymore. And that misreplaced conrod possibly added a bit of extra strain. So I think this is just about ready to get wrapped up and back to my viewer. Right, I can wrap up this little 08 shunter. This is now working perfectly. Just need a good clean, realign the conrods, run a test. Oops. And one day I'll get a good rolling rope. So that's 08 ready to go back to John. All I need to do now is get all the others done. I thought I'd finished the Loco, and I was just reviewing the video I'd made, checking it for errors, when I suddenly realised what a big mistake I'd made. Do you remember this bit? I was just about to put it on the track when I noticed that this front coupler is flopping around, so I think the coupler spring is also missing. So I'm going to attend to that before I do any more. And I'm looking at this and there's a screw missing here. Yes, I said the screw was missing. That one there. It wasn't. That's it. That's in the wrong place. And that's why there was no coupler spring. Because they couldn't fit the coupler spring when the screw was there. This screw is not necessary because the plates, top and bottom here, are held in by this screw in the middle and this screw at the end. So I'm going to take this screw out and leave these two chassis retaining screws. So that goes in there. Whoops. So that is now redundant. I can go back into my box. This coupler can now be fitted with a proper length spring, and then I'll retest it. So I took that screw out. I loosened these two screws to just release this bottom plate enough to withdraw the coupler, and I've removed the spring that I fitted in there temporarily. And now I'm going to fit, which I think is a proper spring. Slide in the front, take the coupler. These couplers have got a little pip at the end, just about make it out maybe, no, yeah, see a wee pip there, that fits into the spring for stability, and then I just manoeuvre that into the housing. And then I can tighten the screws that hold the two plates together, front and rear. That's tight, and that's the spring back where it should be. So I think what has happened is someone has worked on this little locomotive previously. And when they came to fit the two screws, they only had two. And they panicked and think, I've lost a screw. They've seen this big hole here, and it does have a corresponding thread underneath, and thought, I have to fit a screw through there. Put the screw in there, can't fit the coupler string, so just put the coupler back as it was. It flopped about and didn't do much good. And they did not realise, in fact it took me a while to realise, that this is all held on by these two screws and you don't need this one. So I think that's the little 08, I think that's a little 08 now back the way it should be. So I'm going to run it again on the track, and if everything is okay, then I'll just be able to finish this video and get this back to John. So take care everybody, look after yourself, look after each other, and for me it's bye for now, again.